kick it off with a presentation on making veteran homelessness rare and short-lived in our community. And so I'm going to switch screen. So I will share the PowerPoint in 1 second and we can go ahead and get started. Okay. Can everyone see that PowerPoint?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, awesome. Okay, then I'm going to hand it over to Aaliyah to get us started.
Thanks, Christine. Just a quick sound check. Can everyone hear me? Thank you, Christine. I see your head nodding. All right. Fabulous. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's always great to see so many people coming together at these general membership meetings. It's very exciting and invigorating for me. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. My name's Aaliyah Rodriguez. I work for Larimer County. I'm the Housing Stability Manager. I also currently sit as the chair of our Northern Colorado Continuum of Care Board. So I was asked to just start us off with this presentation. There has been a ton of work behind this for many years. We've heard as a community the term functional zero thrown around. We've heard feedback, is it just a gimmick? Is this just something that is a marketing scheme? Or what is functional zero and why are we working towards it? So I just wanted to address those concerns just from the board perspective and really ensure everyone that functional zero and we'll define those things later on in this presentation. But if you're familiar with that term, know that it's not just a term. It's not just to have the gold star next to our name as the NoCO CoC hit functional zero. It's not just to say it, but it's to see it. It's to know that ending homelessness is possible. And it's to see our homeless community members being housed. It's a title that we work hard to achieve because what it means is that we have an efficient system that data shows that we are housing people. We are housing them fast enough that they are not unhoused for a long period of time. And that's a huge achievement. And once our community is able to hit that, for a small population, we're able to learn how we did that and then grow and eventually create a very efficient working system that serves equitably to all across our region. But in order to do that, we have to start small, we have to learn lessons, and then we scale up. So today's presentation is talking about our priorities that were shared earlier. The CoC board voted to prioritize veterans. That means to prioritize our resources as a community. The ask is that our community comes together to prioritize our resources so that we can hit functional zero for our veterans. We can house them efficiently and learn how to do that for other populations. And that's what we're going to learn about today through the rest of this conversation. So I want to say thank you to our CAHPS committee, who's going to be doing this presentation, who has put in this work and is going to walk through what this looks like for our community so we can all come together and work together to reach this really important goal. So I will stop and give it back to Christine.
Thanks, Leah. Just a quick update. So if you have any questions, we just ask that you use the chat. A CoC staff member will respond, or we will follow up via email if we do not have enough time to respond. I also wanted to announce that there will be an opportunity to engage in further discussion next Wednesday, July 24th at noon. We're calling it a lunch and learn. Again, you can just show up, engage in further dialogue, ask some questions, provide some feedback. So I will be putting the link for that virtual meeting in the chat at the end of this presentation. So if you want to, and we'll also follow up with that link as well. But just want to kind of give a heads up that there are a few opportunities for you to ask. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Hunter to kick us off.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Aaliyah, for kicking us off. My name is Hunter Allen. I'm the Coordinated Entry Specialist with the Cheyenne VA in our homeless program. Oversee our VA's involvement in the coordinated entry systems, obviously here in Northern Colorado as well as in Wyoming. It's hard to convey, honestly, how excited I am about this in the virtual setting. I'm not sure I would do better in person, but if we were in person, I would do my best to convey how excited I'm about this there as well. We have some serious momentum built for our veterans in our community and towards reaching functional zero. And I see this as building to that. Aaliyah mentioned functional zero and discussed it as how important it is to measure our progress. And this is a slide just to depict what that looks like visually. Our goal through this prioritization that the board declared is by the end of the year, we want to reach or have our active number of veterans on the by name list as less than our 6-month average housing placement rate. So you can see that there in the image. The 4 on the left represent those on the by name list, the 6 on the right as our average placement rate. Next slide, please. Just for some context, am I able to switch the slide? Oh, I suppose I am. Thank you. Just for some context and what we mean by veterans or how we're tracking this. Obviously, a veteran is someone who served in the armed forces, but we do this by definition, and it has to be someone who has at least 1 day of active duty. We do a lot of work on the back end to verify service status or veteran status based on time in service. And here in our CoC, we're tracking those who have at least 1 day of active duty, regardless of discharge status. Next slide, please. Wanted to toss in.
I apologize.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, continue.
Okay. Just wanted to share the statutes from the Federal Register that we use to determine eligibility status. The first there, the 38 CFR section 3.12 is based on character of discharge. And then the second 38 CFR section 3.12A based on the minimum duty service requirements. And again, we are tracking veterans regardless of discharge status. So honorable all the way through dishonorable, or veterans whose discharge was the result of a general court-martial perhaps. And those who maybe have 20 years of active duty all the way to those who have 1 day of active duty. And our goal is to be sure that regardless of time in service or discharge, that all veterans have a safe place to call home. And I'm going to kick it back to Christine. Thanks for letting me set us up there.
Thank you, Hunter. I have turned off my video because I think I'm having some connectivity issues. So please let me know if my speech gets affected at all. But thank you, Hunter, for that kind of overview. And we wanted to start this conversation by kind of discussing the why. Why did we start with veterans? I think a lot of our community members who have been involved in our region's work for several years know that we've been talking about ending veteran homelessness for some time. But we really sometimes haven't quite given the context as to why. And so it really starts all the way from the beginning. Back in 2016, we were the first sub-region in the balance of state continuum of care to implement coordinated entry. And this was in response to a governor challenge. And we started with the veteran population. And so and on, we basically always had some type of veteran data available in our region. Fast forward 3 years to October 2019 and built for zero through a competitive application process. So just kind of want to say that when we became a built for zero community, thank you. I'm having some issues here. Hold on. I'm so sorry to do this, but I'm gonna ask that Sophie as the slides and see if that will be better. So sorry, everyone, 1 second. Can y'all see those? Yes. Cool. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna give this another attempt. I have the chat open, so I'm gonna keep an eye on it. Thank you very much, Sophie, for being able to step in. Apologies, you guys. But yes, I just wanted to say, so 2019, we become a Built for Zero community, and this is provides us access to technical assistance, regular coaching, an archive of evidence-based best practices and resources to help with case conferencing, whatnot. And then access to other Built for Zero communities who were also trying to end veteran homelessness or another subpopulation's homelessness. And so the idea that Built for Zero really champions is learning from one another. And so this really, when we became a Built for Zero community, it solidified us focusing on the veteran population as the first population that we would try to create an efficient system to address their needs and, again, create a system that could quickly house them if they entered homelessness for the first time or returned homelessness. I won't go through too much of the other slide content. I just want to emphasize, because it's been touched on a few times already, data is a really important part of Built for Zero. And in the last 2 years, there have been significant efforts to really use our HMIS data, create dashboards and reports so that we have really comprehensive data that we're very confident in knowing exactly how many veterans are experiencing homelessness, what that inflow into our system looks like, as well as outflow. So I will pass it on to Brian to get a little bit more into the why veterans.
Thanks, Christine. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So why are we starting with the veteran subpopulation for this push? The veteran population is our smallest subpopulation of households experiencing homelessness. It is also the population we have the most comprehensive data for, given our region's history and more recent data supporting improvements. Built for Zero coaches advised our community leaders several years ago to focus on the veteran population because of its size and data already being collected. So by starting small, we can learn lessons and scale up. And we're hoping that this will be like a snowball rolling down a hill, like the graphic you see on the right, that we will take the lessons we learn reaching functional zero with veterans and apply that to other populations until we have a system that is able to make homelessness rare and brief for all populations experiencing homelessness in Northern Colorado. Next slide. So the existing resources. Veterans do have more existing housing resources and supports than other subpopulations. However, there is still a significant number of veteran households experiencing homelessness. Most veterans have access to these resources, but some do not, which is why we need to dedicate more resources to our veteran population. And a joint community effort will be needed for us to succeed in making veteran homelessness rare and short-lived, which is why we're presenting on this today. I'll pass it back to Christine.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so kind of as we said, there's the history of kind of where we started in our community and the fact that the veteran population is the smallest population in our region at this time. And veterans do have a decent number of existing housing resources, kind of all the reasons why we started with this population. But that, like Brian said, we're trying to build off this momentum and really take what we learn now to apply it to the next population. But all that said, there are some reasons why we haven't yet succeeded that I wanted to touch on today. I'm not going to go over the upstream factors and downstream factors one by one listed here because I know everyone in this room is very aware of the system level and individual barriers that our unhoused community members face on a daily basis. And for the most part, they're really no different for our veteran population than any other population based on what you're seeing here. I did want to touch on the scarcity mindset a bit, because I do want to acknowledge this is somewhat at play in our community. All of us are operating in a system that is facing a scarcity of funding, housing, and staff capacity. And so it can sometimes fuel a hesitance when it is suggested that we may focus on one population of unhoused individuals different from the ones that we serve, right? And I will acknowledge that every service provider in this room has a dedicated population that they serve, whether that be youth, families, domestic violence survivors, the chronic population. Y'all are experts at serving these individuals, and we know that each and every one of them deserve housing because these are human beings and housing is a human right. So, you know, it's very challenging to kind of hear, okay, we're going to focus on the veteran population. But really, again, why we're making this ask is because we know that it really requires a community effort with all hands on deck to significantly address this population's needs and create a system that is effective and efficient. And if, you know, it's really a ask of the CoC governing board and the CAHPS Steering Committee that we focus on the small baby steps to create an equitable system that can serve all populations. We have to start small. We have to look at one population and see what are the approaches that are most effective, because they will be slightly different, but there are things that we will apply from each population to the next. And again, I will just really emphasize that the broad community buy-in is what will get us to ending veteran homelessness and allow us to focus on the next population. With that said, so if you can pass it to the next slide, please. I do want to talk about kind of why we're saying that we need so much community buy-in and all hands on deck. We have a few approaches moving forward that we'd really like to underscore the importance of. And so I'm going to touch on a few and then kind of emphasize the most important one that we've seen the most impact in our community. So the first, just quickly, offering flexible financial assistance, really valuable, right? Every individual might have a different barrier to housing or housing stability. And so when we have a funding source that is pretty flexible and can be tapped into to support a veteran, that is great. And so we've had a Veteran Flex Fund in place since spring of 2023, and we've successfully helped 19 unique veterans with that funding support. We have a few other ways to support them as well. We have learned how valuable it is to have partnerships with landlords. And so establishing a brick and mortar pipeline is something that we will still try to continue and broaden those partnerships. You know, a voucher in hand without the physical unit will not end an episode of homelessness. So we have to have that housing inventory available, and we need it to be affordable. And so we've kind of seen a recent partnership with Oak Ridge Crossing of kind of them letting us know when a unit is available, and our veteran providers and mainstream providers have also kind of worked to identify households that would be eligible and kind of get them ready if that unit were available. And it worked really well. And so we'd love to kind of build off of that success and find other partnerships as well. As Aaliyah mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, it was a governing board recommendation recently to prioritize veteran households. And part of that is prioritizing veterans for housing resources that are assigned through our case conferencing process for the next 6 months. So this will be a temporary approach to trying to reach our functional zero goals, but will be an important one. It's something that we have not tried yet in our community, and that's part of what Built for Zero a lot of times will echo as well, is like we have to try new things, and we have kind of a time frame implemented, and then we can examine what went well, what didn't, and make tweaks. And so we're going to do that as well. But then the last thing that I think has been most emblematic of the success that we can have when we work together is enhancing support networks for our veteran population. So when we've recently really leveraged staff time to support our veterans, specifically those that have been assigned to housing resources through the veteran case conferencing process. And so we've kind of had identified a support team of providers who are willing to kind of work with the individual on different tasks. So maybe someone agrees to do more of the outreach with the veteran who has been assigned a resource, help with some vital document acquisition. And then another says, hey, I can help them complete their voucher application. And so when we kind of have multiple providers working together, we have seen a significant reduction in the amount of time that it takes for someone who's assigned a resource to them kind of completing all the necessary paperwork and getting that voucher in hand. Just want to emphasize this since May of this year, we have assigned 13 HUD-VASH vouchers, which is unprecedented, at least in my time in this space over the last few years. I've never seen that degree of assignments in such a short amount of time. So we really want to say thank you to all the providers that have stepped up to support these veterans. And that's something that we will definitely continue to focus on since it's had such an impact. All that said, I'm going to pass it to Jillian to kind of discuss the prioritization of veterans, since that is something new in our community.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, we expect there's going to be a lot of questions and concerns about specifically the veteran prioritization. So hopefully this will give you a better idea right off the bat of what it will not look like. This will not look like referring veterans to inappropriate resources. We will definitely still only refer folks that are eligible and a good fit for the right resources. It will also not look like only housing veterans for the next 6 months. We will still kind of proceed with business as usual, but with that added veteran prioritization when it is applicable. And this will also not look like we are adopting a system-based process of prioritizing the least vulnerable. Again, we're going to still prioritize folks based on each program's or each resource's eligibility. So it will not be just assigning veterans to resources just for the sake of housing them. It will still be assigning them to the proper resources, but with that added prioritization of and preference for veterans over others. I'll hand it back to Christine.
Thanks, Jen. So kind of the last thing that we really wanted to touch on, this presentation obviously focuses a lot on the now, kind of us sharing the momentum that we've recently observed and kind of wanting to continue the efforts, try new things. And so hoping that we can reach functional zero for our veteran population by the end of this year. But we are also thinking to the future. How does addressing the veteran population now prepare us for the next population? And so we did want to share that most likely the next subpopulation that we will focus on is youth. And similar to kind of the why behind why we focused on veterans, is this population size is the next smallest population in our region. And we also think that it'd be a really appropriate time to start focusing on the youth population because of upcoming projects. So with the youth shelter coming online later this year or early 2025, we know that we'll have a lot more data on those that are experiencing homelessness or youth that are experiencing homelessness in our community. And we'll also have a much better regional understanding of the unique needs and vulnerabilities of this population. And so kind of we want to build the infrastructure to support the youth population while maintaining supports for the veteran population, right? When we move forward, it's not, okay, we got that, as Leah said, kind of like, we got the gold star, we reached functional zero for our veteran population. We're good. It's a dynamic state that we have to sustain. So we have to make sure that we're still focusing on the veteran population, but hopefully by then we've created a system that is efficient and effective in housing them quickly. And so we can, again, kind of pivot to more attention on the youth population. And then we can build off that success and go to the next population until we've created a system that is really responsive to the needs of all populations in our community. And last but not least, I just wanted to say a thank you. Thank you to the CoC Governing Board, our CAHPS Steering Committee, and those of you for listening in on this conversation today. We really appreciate your time. And I'll just kind of echo one more time that there will be an opportunity further engage in conversation next Wednesday, July 24th at noon. I'm going to put the link in the chat in just a moment. It will be virtual, but like I said, anyone's welcome to attend. So just if you want to percolate on this information a little bit longer, and then come and ask some questions, I'd be happy to address them. So I'm going to put that link in the chat, and then go ahead and we can get ready for our domestic violence training.
Christine, this is Lyle with United Way of Well County. Real quick, I do have a question on this, and it comes out of our conversations about what kind of capacity do we need that will be short-term perhaps, or kind of at a short-term outlook. And one of the things we've talked about, you and I, was the need for case management for veterans. And sometimes a veteran will have a resource and they don't have case management. And to this point, my sense is that we've relied on, VA and VOA for that case management, which is good. And at the same time, if they're out of capacity for case management, could we find community capacity to work with a veteran as in case management, even though we're not the VA or the VOA, because they have that voucher or they have that housing resource, but they just need that assistance. Is this the kind of thing that you could see happening for the next 6 months for, helping us to get to functional zero?
I mean, I think what I would say, and kind of going back to the support networks, I think most of the conversations have focused on that early piece of support. Mm-hmm. So really, instead of putting it all on the veteran provider who might be providing some of that case management support later on, we have our mainstream providers who are also at the table to provide that support. Again, with that outreach, engagement, the vital documents, the application process. We've kind of seen when everyone comes together, it just decreases the amount of time that we spend on that process significantly. I'm not with the case management. I mean, yeah, we're all, I think, would recognize that capacity is always a challenge. And so if there are opportunities, I would say we would never refuse that. But I don't know if any of our veteran providers want to speak more to that as well. But that's kind of what I would say.
So kind of more like a coordinating of capacity to do kind of beginning third of a stage process. Let's say if the process going back into housing is several different stages, it's that first stage that there will be a lot of energy put towards on the part of CAHPS Steering Committee in this, and then typically the case management will still be VOA or VA. Is that the sense?
I believe so. I see Betsy and Hunter with their hands up though, so I might allow them to chime in.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm not really sure what Hunter's going to say, but I will say that I think we work really hard to coordinate with other providers and make sure that veterans are connected. We're also very aware of when somebody needs additional resources, talking about it with the VA, and Hunter can talk more about this. Sometimes we do step back in and we help people. I mean, that's part of what we're supposed to do, but I think that, and we have also worked with the city of Greeley, for instance, with one particular veteran that really needed additional support. And there are others. I mean, I think we do collaborate pretty well, and we continue to try and look for those types of resources moving forward. The other thing is we have a lot of resources available to us that we didn't used to have. So those are some of the things that we can use in terms of, sometimes we're able to return people back to their original place or their original home. Sometimes we're able to pay for additional resources that might help them stay in their home. So there's a lot of different things that we also have a shallow flat or a shallow subsidy program now if they're in SSVF, where the goal of that really is to help them get out of poverty and or to help sustain them until they're able to get a voucher. And during that time, there is case management that goes on making sure that they get support. And that can last for 2 to 4 years, depending on the situation. So we have more time to try and make those things happen. But I do feel like we are, in terms of collaboration, there's a lot of really great collaboration going on. Because sometimes there are veterans that don't qualify for our programs, but I know VCP has stepped up at certain circumstances and things like that. So Hunter, I'll let you go.
Hey, thanks, Betsy. I'm glad you brought this up, Lyle. Christine mentioned some of the coordination that we ramped up starting in May in terms of HUD-VASH assignments specifically, and what that's looked like to really collaborate with the community in a different way than we have historically. Just for context, veterans in HUD-VASH receive clinical case management throughout the duration of their program. So this could last for the rest of a veteran's life while in housing. And that is a VA responsibility and a VA program at that point, right? And wouldn't necessarily expect any community partner to be providing those case management services while a veteran's in housing. What we're seeing though is when we're engaging a veteran who's experiencing homelessness and making a referral into HUD-VASH, the VA may not be the, or even another veteran provider, an SSVF grantee may not be the provider that a veteran is most closely working with in the moment or has the best rapport with in the moment. And we've seen this with the outreach teams, with our day shelter staff, emergency shelter staff throughout the community. And so coordinating with staff that a veteran might trust now and have rapport with to just complete some of those initial documents, the VASH paperwork, gathering ID, social security card, things like that, has really expedited the process to get vouchers into veteran hands. And this coordination, I think, exists beyond HUD-VASH as well. There's support we can get just in the housing search process, sending leads. Our team is small and we can't be necessarily all over the CoC and in all the different spaces where we're supporting veterans. So coordinating with agencies that are everywhere else has been incredibly helpful.
Thank you. That's great.
I see a lot of great questions in the chat, so I appreciate everyone for their thoughtfulness. We'll definitely follow up via email because I do want to kind of pass it over to our victim service providers for their presentation, since it's a detailed one, and we also anticipate some questions as well. So yeah, just you can keep the questions in the chat, but we'll make sure to address them. And then I did put the link for the lunch and learn for next week as well. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to pass it off to our victim service providers, but this is a presentation that Alternatives to Violence, A Woman's Place, and Crossroads all worked on together. So you'll be hearing from all three of those agencies, but I'm going to pass it off to them so that they can share all their lovely knowledge.
Thanks, Sophie. My name is Desiree. I'm the housing coordinator at A Woman's Place. Can everyone hear me? My Wi-Fi is a bit awesome. So like Sophie said, we've worked on this with the service providers we have for domestic violence in Northern Colorado. We're lucky enough to have multiple of them. So we just want to talk about domestic violence in general, especially working in this population, tips working with Category 4 households who are unhoused, and survivors who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. If we could hold all the questions until the end, I think we're hoping to have a little bit of a question answer where all of us can try to answer your questions. If you go to the next slide. So for domestic violence, the state statute in Colorado is domestic violence in an intimate relationship. We're not asking our clients to show that it was a sexually intimate relationship, just as long as they consider them an intimate partner. And it's all about power and control. So someone taking power control over another person and using that to oversee basically the relationship. And that can come in a lot of different forms. If you go to the next slide, Sophie.
Yeah, me too.
Typically, this is what we see in domestic violence. Obviously, every case is different, but In the relationship, there's always a whole bunch of tension building, like small arguments, things like that. Typically, the survivor, the person trying to flee, is trying to do everything to keep the perpetrator happy, trying to keep the abuser happy. There's usually a massive incident. This could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It could be a really extreme amount of like mental abuse, emotional abuse. It could be something physical. So there's a large incident that pops up, a big between the two of them. And then there's reconciliation. So we talk about like love bombing. I'm so sorry, that'll never happen again. A lot of blaming the survivor for why it happened. Like, well, if you would have done this, this wouldn't have happened. So things kind of get calm again, and we move into the calm phase. And then as soon as that calm starts to fade a little bit, and for some people, this could all happen in a day. For some people, this is over months, over years. The calm phase moves back into the tension phase. We have another incident, and the cycle just continues. We do say it takes about 7 times for a survivor to flee their abusive partner. People they love this person. That's why they're in a relationship with them. So it's a really hard challenge for people to, even in this cycle, to realize the cycle is happening. I've seen personally people step out of it, and we explain this. They really can understand, like, oh, okay, I can kind of see why I was stuck there. But so it does make working with this population a little bit harder too, because people don't necessarily want to leave because it's someone who they love. And this cycle is just continuing constantly. Can we go to the next slide, please? And then as far as types of abuse, I mean, it covers anything you can possibly think of. These are kind of the main 6 categories. So physical abuse, obviously, when someone is putting their hands on someone else, sexual abuse, stalking, mental and emotional abuse, financial abuse, verbal abuse. A lot of times we see that people don't really think they are experiencing domestic violence because they haven't been touched before. No one's put their hands on them, but mental and emotional abuse can be even more draining. People can also use cultures against each other. They can use children against each other, and those all kind of fall under these categories. I'm sure that every person in this room has worked with a household who has experienced domestic violence. So part of this presentation is to just help with tips for someone who just closes that. Not everyone wants to reach out to a domestic violence shelter because they don't really think they're experiencing domestic violence. I took a call yesterday where someone said, I really don't know if I am appropriate for your shelter because no one's ever hit me before. But unfortunately, we're definitely a victim of domestic violence. So I'm going to hand this over to Alternatives to Violence to talk about kind of what we see daily at domestic violence shelters.
Hey, can everyone hear me? Cool. Okay, my name is Sierra. I'm one of the housing case managers with Alternatives to Violence, and we wanted to spend just a little bit of time explaining what it can look at to be a domestic violence agency and just some of the day-to-day activities there. So of course, throughout all 3 of our agencies, Alternatives to Violence, Crossroads, and A Woman's Place, we're really focusing on trauma-informed care and support throughout the entire process. So we have clients who will walk in, give us calls, texts, and we'll help them as best as we can, responding to clients who are in active trauma response. And this can look like, validating their experiences, navigating different barriers to exiting these relationships, and helping them meet their basic needs. So this can go, from anything to someone coming up saying, the big incident happened last night, their brain is kind of fried, they don't really know where to start. And so we'll sit down and, just kind of validate, say it's real, and connect them to anything that they need. And it can also range to folks who have been in a relationship for years and they know how to deal with it, what their perpetrator acts, what to expect, but they're getting ready to leave. So with all of that, all 3 of our agencies do offer case management as well. So creating different goals and meeting a client where they're at, all through all stages, mental, emotional, physical. And with what Desiree was saying, it is true that it takes folks about 7 times to fully leave their perpetrator. And so we will support clients even if they return to their perpetrator, and we will always welcome them back as well. I have had clients who have entered our program and who said, actually, I'm good staying here. This is the person I love. And we say, okay, we're here 24/7. So don't hesitate to ever reach out again, because we don't want them to feel any sense of judgment that would prevent them from seeking help in the future. We also do a lot of safety planning, and this is something we'll cover more in depth later in the presentation. The safety of clients is the main priority, and safety planning is often just brainstorming any and all ideas to keep them safe in their specific situation. So we'll talk more on that later. And then, of course, we do a lot of crisis work. All three of us operate emergency shelters, so we're all familiar with what it looks like to walk someone through a mental health crisis. Folks who call in a panic during abuse escalating, folks going through substance withdrawals, looking at treating injuries from abusive partners, encouraging them to seek the help, getting them to understand the risks of what happens when they've been strangled. So all of that is something that we are able to help with. So next slide, please. Some unique agencies that unique circumstances that we encounter at our agencies. We do work with Category 4 homelessness along with Category 1. As a brief refresher, Category 1 are the folks who are literally homeless, so the typical things you think of, shelters, cars on the streets and stuff. But we do also work with Category 4 homelessness, and these are those who are still living with their perpetrator but are actively attempting to flee. And so because of that, it gives us a little bit more flexibility to focus less on length of time than our mainstream providers. And there's an increased emphasis on client safety. So, if the relationship's only been a couple of months long, but there's guns around and they've been strangled and there's high, increased flags of lethality, that is someone that we will try to prioritize to get into a safe spot away from their perpetrator quicker, just to make sure that we're keeping them safe. We do also have to manage our interactions with abusive partners. They are, as we all know, very dedicated in trying to keep the power and control that Desiree was talking about earlier. So we have all had experiences with abusive partners trying to call or visit our safe houses. Sometimes they'll get their family members to say, they're just trying to check in, or they're just wondering if we've heard from this person. And we've even had abusive partners call the police to try to do welfare checks on their person that is trying to escape and be safe. So because all three of us are confidential, whenever we have someone who is calling or around or just asking about the whereabouts of one of our clients, we will respond pretty automatically with, we cannot confirm or deny, but maybe if it's applicable, I might be able to pass on a message. So we just shut all of that down. We're not able to give any updates or anything like that to make sure that our folks are safe. And so with that, we do have security protocols for all of our buildings. So we either have on-site security. I know alternatives to violence, we have cameras, we have safety buttons that we can press, locked doors, individualized codes. I know some of us have police presence, locked entrances, undisclosed locations, just to try to decrease the amount that we have to interact with those abusive partners as much as possible. And with that, we are ready and prepared for emergencies at all times. I'm so sorry about that. We are ready for emergencies at all times. We have 24-hour safe lines for households experiencing domestic violence. They are staffed throughout all weekends, 24/7, all holidays. And they are really just kind of the default. If someone has any questions or, like Desiree is saying, I'm not sure if, they qualify as being domestic violence, we always just encourage them to call the 24/7 hotline and we will help however we can. Oh, yeah, thank you. Next slide. And I will pass it on to Mo.
So actually, we do have Sinclair and Olivia here. So I think I'm gonna pass it on to Sinclair. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Sinclair. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the direct service manager at Crossroads. I wanted to talk a little bit about why some people are not eligible for shelter services and a variety of programs and what those circumstances may be. We all work within confidentiality, so I think it's really important to break down those barriers of understanding whenever possible. One of the primary reasons we encounter is when there are DV charges that can shape an individual's options for shelter. This could look like a charge, a protection order, time served. Now, this is agency dependent. We also recognize that in a lot of times where there are interactions with law enforcement, the abusive partner will sometimes manipulate those interactions, leading to the arrest of a survivor. So when you are seeking services initially with someone who you believe is experiencing domestic violence, we always encourage just calling and reaching out to see what their options may be, regardless of what interactions with law enforcement may have been like. However, all agencies, for the most part, in most circumstances, do have a hard limit around a conflict of interest. Providers are unable to work with both parties in a relationship where we've identified abuse. Even in circumstances like that, sometimes we can give referrals, but I will say that is often the hard limit that we will come against when it comes to giving people services. We do also really lead with safety first in so many of these policies. And all of our programs, I know for Crossroads, both residential and non-residential, have policies against abusive behaviors towards other individuals in our programs. That can be staff, that can be other clients. And this is just to promote the safety of everyone and to make sure that everyone can navigate their own concerns and seek support without further re-traumatization whenever possible. However, we know that this is incredibly individualized, and in extreme cases where it seems like we're not able to work with a person in a way that's safe for them and those around them, we will sometimes have to put a temporary and rarely a permanent hold on that individual receiving services from a specific agency, and often then we'll follow up with referring them out to other places that may be a better fit for the support that they're looking for. Now, I definitely understand that safety is a theme in a lot of these reasonings. Safety is incredibly individualized. We know that survivors are their own best predictor of the danger that they may be in. And sometimes if you are in a confidential shelter program, if an abusive partner knows the location of the shelter, it would create an unsafe situation, not just for that survivor, but also for other clients and staff. And it wouldn't be sustainable for them to stay in that shelter. Crossroads is in a unique position where we are a disclosed location and we have different levels of security precautions because of that. However, that also doesn't work for some individuals who maybe have very nuanced stalking concerns. So it's much more about leading with what the best fit for the survivor's safety needs are, and then following up for where this may pertain to the safety needs of anyone else. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So when an individual is seeking services, we want to always make sure that we are not promising that we can give them support outside of our scope of services. The most fundamental way that this plays out in our work, and the way we most often have to decline to give someone services at a time, is because we simply do not have a bed available. Our shelter is full. Another component of that is we make sure that there is always going to be adequate staffing to support the individual with their ongoing safety needs. And when bed and staffing capacity doesn't allow us to create an environment that's safe for that survivor and or their family, that is when we often do not have availability to offer them support. I do also want to acknowledge that this isn't just internal guidelines. For example, we know we have a 1 head per bed policy, which shapes how, even if, say, a parent and child want to co-sleep, we have to put them into a room with 2 beds for health and safety reasons that are set by best community guidelines that we've found to follow. Moving on, we also definitely understand that domestic violence occurs at the intersection of other adversities. This can also be very challenging because there are, sorry about that, on occasion, individuals who maybe experienced a domestic violence incident a year or two ago that resulted in, for example, the loss of a job, and that's impacted their ability to maintain housing. However, we would then work with that individual for more of a homelessness resource if that domestic violent incident that happened in the past is not impacting their immediate safety. We also recognize that we are not a medical facility. We are not a mental health care facility. The same way we don't promise things that are outside of our capacity. We don't promise things that are outside of our scope of services. And instead, we want to work with other facilities that can support medical needs, mental health needs, substance use needs, if that's the primary need of that individual, either to sustain them in our program or to get support from there first and then work with us at a later time. Now, we also know that eligibility can be shaped by that primary need, but it's important to distinguish what type of interpersonal violence is this person experiencing. Here at Crossroads and also at A Woman's Place, our funding determines that we are only able to survive people who are navigating intimate partner violence. ATV has been, I know, a critical resource for so many of our clients when it comes to individuals experiencing family violence, roommate violence, and human trafficking. So again, it's always worth calling an agency if you're looking for support for an individual who's experiencing any type of interpersonal violence. Any agency would be able to provide some nuanced referrals and get them to the most sustainable shelter solution for them possible. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Hello again. So I wanted to get a little bit more into the actual tips and tricks that we can give mainstream providers in regards to working with domestic violence households, and specifically for right now, Category 4 households. With HMIS, as domestic violence and victim service providers, we're not allowed legally to use HMIS. So we've worked very closely with Sophie and the CAHPS team to create a different database in order to make sure that all of our folks that we assess through the VI SPDAT is all of their information is kept in that separate spreadsheet, so no one can see any of their actual identifying information. This allows us to give them a coded name and put that coded name onto the by name list instead. So when everyone else is looking at it, they will only see like ATV 123 until they are referred to a resource, and then that is when we are allowed to release their contact information and their name to the resource they were referred to. The reason that we do this is because perpetrators are in all walks of life, and we want to make sure that folks are kept as safe as they can. Abusive partners could have access to HMIS and CAHPS, and especially with HMIS, with how services are logged, that could give them information as to where they're sleeping, as to who they're interacting with. So when someone discloses that they are experiencing domestic violence, it is really important to have open and honest communication about HMIS entry. A lot of nonprofits have access to this information, including their current living situation, which is why we just want to give clients the choice as to where and who can see all of their information. So we really want to emphasize that if you're working with someone with domestic violence experiences, that you're explaining the confidentiality differences between accessing services with mainstream providers and victim service providers. And this can look as easy as saying, if you're working with us, we'll put your information into a database that a bunch of different nonprofits throughout Northern Colorado can see. Is that something you feel safe with? And if that's not something that they're feeling good about, looking into referring them to victim service providers, especially if that client is not safe and needs safe and discreet location. We will be able to provide majority all the same services, but keeping them off of that online database and helping keeping their information more secure and private. So thank you. Okay, next slide, please.
Yeah, and so another tip for mainstream providers is that any person that discloses they're in a domestic violence situation, if they have already left, they're planning to leave, or you just know the situation is unsafe, is a safety plan. Really, it's just a helpful guide to whatever the client says that they need for safety to help them kind of plan how to keep themselves and their family, if they have a family, as safe as possible. This changes going on. It changes while they're in the household. It changes when they go into shelter. This is likely going to change when they're placed into their own apartment. And so just continuing to talk about with the client, like the best ways to keep them safe. If we could go to the next slide, please. The big thing with safety planning is, especially in a situation where we know there's an increased lethality risk, we just want to make sure that we are really brainstorming with the clients and the survivors on what we can help them plan for to keep them safe. So in domestic violence situations where a firearm is involved, the homicide risk increases by 500%. So if there are weapons in the situation, we automatically know that it's definitely a more dangerous situation for the survivor, especially if they're still in the house or have just left. That's usually when tension is the highest. And in non-fatal strangulation, it increases the odds of homicide by 700%. So if someone is willing to strangle someone up to the point of homicide, the chances of that being pushed further is increasingly higher. So if a survivor were to disclose that to you, we definitely want to make sure that we're talking about how to keep them as safe as possible. And I'm going to pass this on to Jillian, who has some more tips about safety planning.
Thank you, Desiree. Yeah, so we just want people to feel more and more comfortable about safety planning themselves if they ever need to. So yeah, we're going to go really into it. Something that all three of our agencies ask clients when they come in is, has the abuse escalated or changed recently? Abuse ebbs and flows over time, as we went over the cycle of abuse earlier. It will be worse at times and be better at times. So it's really important to get a gauge of where exactly they are on that spectrum at that time so that you know how to plan with them moving forward. Another good question to ask right off the bat, as Sierra has mentioned, is, do you feel safe staying where you are right now, or do you need to get somewhere safe as soon as possible? This will dictate how you safety plan with anyone right off the bat. If this will dictate if you should be looking at safe shelters, or if you should get more into, okay, you're okay right now, but let's plan for what happens if you decide you're not okay anymore. These are really just kind of good right out of the gate questions to get a sense of where exactly, along with those lethality questions that Desiree just mentioned, to get a really good gauge of where they're at right now so that you know how to plan with them moving forward. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Are there concerns about tracking is another big question we always ask. It is upsettingly easy to track someone's whereabouts in 2024, especially without them knowing. You can have trackers on your car, you can have trackers in your phone. A tracker in your phone might not always look like, oh, this is a GPS tracker app. We know of clients that have had one hidden in their phone that looks like their calculator app, so they would never even know. So asking them, is that a concern that you guys have? Let's figure out what to do from there. A lot of auto body shops will do a free scan for trackers on cars just to make sure that there's nothing there. And we often refer to places like the Geek Squad or places like that to check through phones and things, just in case, because it's very easy to not know if your phone is being tracked. So even just turning off your location, and all of our shelters do typically provided protected parking, so that if your car is identifiable, it's at least protected from street view so that an abuser crossing by might not recognize, oh, that's clearly where they're at. If it's always helpful to ask clients that you're working with, if I see you in public, how should I approach that, especially if you're with your perpetrator? We have had clients see us in Walmart and come to us the next day saying, why didn't you say hi to me? That's so rude. And we, as with our confidentiality guidelines, we cannot say hi to people if we see them out and about. And that's mainly for their safety, especially if they are with their abuser. You might not want them to know, they might not want their abuser to know that they are working with local resources to get different housing or whatever you might provide. So it's always a good thing to ask, hey, just in case that ever happens, what do you want me to do? Should I acknowledge you? Should I not acknowledge you? Am I your friend from church? Whatever you got to go, let's roll with whatever they're saying, how they know you. It's always important too to ask, is it safe to contact you? Is it safe to call, email, or leave voicemails with you? A lot of perpetrators we know monitor phones or hold on to someone's phone and keep track of their communications and their whereabouts and things like that. So if alternatives to violence is texting a client and someone sees that come up, that might not be safe for that client. We don't want to put them in more danger. So especially if you are a known provider or Googleable or anything like that, it's always good to make sure, hey, is it safe that I call you at this number? Is it safe I email you here? Is it safe to leave a voicemail? Will someone else have access to those messages if they come up? Things like that, just to make sure. And even suggesting to clients deleting calls from history, maybe saving different numbers in as different names, and just remembering, okay, Kelly is actually Sinclair at A Woman's Place, and I know to answer those calls. Just thinking outside of the box is so often a huge part of what we do, especially in safety planning. And then asking, if things get worse, do you have a plan? Where are you going to go? So even like if they do decide, okay, I am okay right now, abuse is not that bad right now, we're pretty calm, make a plan with them for when it might not be calm, just in case. Even if they think we're on the up and up and we're all good to go, that's awesome. But just in case, let's talk through a plan if that changes. And, collecting things like evidence, keeping extra, keeping a go bag, talking about what to put in that, different documents that might be tough to replace. But also do remember, documents are replaceable. Most things are replaceable. If you don't have time to prepare for those things, I mean, I'm sure that all of our agencies have had folks come in with the clothes on their back, and that's what they got to work with. Sometimes it's not always a possibility to plan for a safe exit, but it is always helpful if you can get that chance to walk them through those different outcomes and make sure they're thinking through different possibilities. Even if they talk to them about their support system, do they have good neighbors that understand the situation? Do they have friends nearby or family nearby, or anyone that they can just call immediately and who will know what's going on and know kind of what to do? If they don't have a support system, say they moved in from out of town, think about where they can go if they are actively fleeing. If you're actively in danger, can you go to a nearby library? Is there a police station nearby? Is there a school campus? Is there a fast food restaurant? Where can there be more witnesses in case you actually do need someone's help immediately? Just thinking through those different situations, it's really putting yourself in their shoes and thinking, what would you do if you were feeling deeply unsafe in that moment? And I will pass it over to Marcus to give a couple more tips. Oh, I'm sorry, to Crossroads.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Olivia. I am the housing program coordinator with Crossroads. And I'm going to narrow down a little bit on families, as I am sure we are unfortunately all coming to realize abuse is not just limited to an individual. It goes throughout their entire lives. It affects their job, it affects their housing. And unfortunately, that means it also can affect children and families. Something to note is that non-biological children can often be an extra inciting factor. A lot of abusers don't like the reminder that their partner was ever with someone else. So taking into consideration the composition of the family that you are working with can be important. not all abuse is the same, which means it won't impact children and families in the same way. So the baseline recommendations that we have are include the children and be open with them and honest at an age appropriate level. I can send some documents to Sophie and Christine to mass distribute that we use as resources for ways you can talk to children about what's happening with domestic violence, because children are smart. They are going to see what is happening. They might not be able to understand the full scope, but a lot of times they know something is wrong, and they might think it's their fault. They might think they need to do something about it. They might want to do something about it, even if they aren't blaming themselves. A lot of kids want to help their parents when they see them in trouble. So it's really important to think about if there are children involved and how you can make those children feel seen and useful while also keeping them safe. It's another really important thing we like to go over, because some individuals will not proceed with services if their children will not also be supported through the process, or if their children do not understand or feel comfortable with proceeding through the process. So understanding that in this situation, paying a little bit extra attention to the children and what they're going through is really important and helpful. So within those safety planning, have you considered the children at all? In the house, are the children leaving with the survivor to go to the fast food restaurant? When the children are leaving, do they have an actual plan? That's the bottom bullet point. Give children instructions what to do. It's often helpful to be more clear than, if something happens, we're going to leave. They need to know, hey, don't try and get in the way. Go grab the backpacks that we keep under the bed. Leave through the window or the back door or the front door. Call the neighbor and meet at this place, or whatever plan fits best for the family, but giving the children a very clear cut, when something happens, this is what you do, and this is the best way for you to help in a situation. Additionally, when the abuse has escalated to the point where the abuser is abusing the children or triangulating the children, it's important to consider where the children are also accessible and where they might be contacted by the abuser. So can they be accessed at schools or daycares or at friends' house? If they do go to school, is the abusive partner allowed to pick them up from school? Many schools allow both guardians to pick up the kid. Some have a list, so making sure that the school or the daycare is aware at least who can and cannot be picking up the child is important. And to that end, if there are protection orders that cover the children, making sure that the children have a copy of that protection order on them, just in case it ever comes up. If the abuse is occurring in a separated relationship, is there a safe place for custody exchanges? With children, I mentioned triangulation, and using the kid as a tool for abuse happens. And so are you making those custody exchanges in a place that is safe for the child, safe for the partner, public, and minimizing that ability to turn the custody exchange into a power and control scenario? Also, what about pets? We care about our children, we care about our pets. pets also get caught in the proverbial crossfire of abuse, and nobody wants to leave their pets in a situation they think they might become unsafe. Some shelters do accept pets. Some shelters like Crossroads accept pets for a limited amount of time. Some shelters can only accept service animals. So it's important to think about if the pets need to be involved, where can they go? And if they can't follow residents to a shelter, what are some other options? For example, the Larimer County, or formerly the Larimer County, rather than Northern Colorado. I need to get with their name change. Formerly the Larimer County organization, they have their IHC program, which supports through CSU. Pets often require a lot of additional case management and navigation that I don't think we see. NoCO Humane, thank you so much. So yeah, NoCO Humane has a pet fostering program, but getting into those pet fostering programs can be a little bit of a challenge, figuring out the transportation, getting the application and all the communications. So for case managers, leaving time for pet case management as well is something we found helpful in getting people safely. And then, yeah, if the perpetrator can contact children, if they have phones, technology, in that communication, making sure they know what is and isn't safe to share with the perpetrator. We're not trying to remove relationships from anyone. We understand that family relationships are nuanced, but if it's not safe for the perpetrator to know where the kids are, kids should know, you know, talk to them, but don't share your location. So I'll pass the baton.
Thank you, Olivia. And again, kind of going off of what Olivia was saying, especially with the code system, sometimes that is a really handy tool for folks with kiddos. I know we had a client recently who their children knew, hey, if I ask you to go water the plants next door, they know that that means, okay, I'm going to go to the neighbors next door and I'm going to stay there until my dad comes to get me. And dad was the client in this case. So that was kind of a nice handy way of telling the children, hey, right now I need you to not be here for your safety. And then the neighbors were on the same page and everything. It's nice to have those kind of fancy, not fancy, but handy terms that you can know exactly what someone's meaning, that they're asking for help without directly asking for help. If you're working with someone, maybe give them your direct extension and say, hey, call me. And the classic is order a pizza. And I will know that that means you need law enforcement help. Give me your address. And instead of a pizza coming, law enforcement will be coming to help you. And those are just really basic examples, but anything like that, any kind of way that you can think outside the box with a client of how can you ask for help without directly asking for help and maybe drawing attention to you in a way that would escalate things with your abuser. Emphasize collecting evidence too for long-term help. If you know that someone might need a protection order down the line, or even if that's a slight possibility that they might have on their radar, it's really helpful to talk to them about getting those things, getting things in evidence and getting photos, you know, recording phone calls, recording video calls, getting screenshots and keeping a log of incidents that happen. Evidence can just look like written down log of this happened on this day, this happened on this day. That goes further than you might think when getting things like protection orders. That might really give people a lot more safety. So even if they're not at that point right now that they want to pursue that legally, it is good to kind of plan for that just in case. And always be aware of surroundings, you know, talk to clients about that. Make sure that if things are escalating, maybe leave the kitchen where there's knives on the counter. Maybe I had a client a while ago that she had one wall in her home that was shared with her next door neighbor, and she knew to go in there anytime they were fighting so that the neighbor could hear what was going on. So if things did escalate or get to a point that she needed help, someone was maybe more likely to hear her and get that help for her. So again, it really is just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit and making new systems to where if they do need to ask for help, even if they don't need it right now, think of ways that they can do that without drawing more attention and escalating things even more. And I will hand it over to Marcus to start wrapping us up.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Marcus. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the other housing case manager alongside Sierra at Alternatives to Violence. I kind of just wanted to give us some wrap up ideas. So while we've been talking about some examples of questions to begin safety planning and best practices, I think that's important to emphasize that safety planning can and will look different for every individual that you work with. So it's important to approach it with an open mind, collaboration, and creativity, especially because survivors are the experts of their own experience. So while we've presented a variety of ideas on how to start that safety planning process, the safety plan should be centered on the survivor's unique situation. So, and that's also including cultural considerations and any other marginalized identities of the survivor. So including gender identity or neurodiversity. And safety planning can feel really daunting. So I would encourage anyone who's struggling with creating a safety plan to connect with their peers and process with them, because more often than not, our peers have thought of things that we might have missed. And that's something that is very much a daily aspect of working in these agencies is talking to our peers and collaborating and asking each other questions, because no one is the arbiter of truth on safety planning. You know, everybody has good ideas. So that being said, if any mainstream providers are needing to refer out to us, here is the best ways to do so. You know, most of us have 24-hour crisis lines and stuff like that you can always give to folks. And I know that at least myself, and I'm sure that my other victim service providers would be happy to talk to anyone to give them ideas on how to create a safety plan or any unique situations that people haven't had before. So if anyone else wants to jump in from the other service providers, I think we can probably go ahead and move to the next slide for questions, if anyone has them.
While questions pop up, I do want to add that the Crossroads website has a dedicated link to safety planning and things you can consider and things like that. So yes, Marcus is absolutely correct. Please call us. We're happy to talk things through with you. If you need just a quick reference link, that's available on the website.
I also just wanted to add that if you are doing ongoing case management with an individual or family experiencing interpersonal violence, the secondary impact on service providers is something we're very aware of. If you ever, that crisis line exists for all of you as well. If you ever want to call and talk over, how do I support this client better? What does what can an approach look like? I really just always want to share that we are here for the amazing community of support we have here as well with all of you. So never hesitate to just call and talk over a situation if you have questions or want to brainstorm or would like support. Thank you.
This is Lyle with United Way of Will County. What is that phone number?
I'll go ahead and post the crisis line in the chat for everyone.
Yeah, great. And you might put contact info for one of you from each of your organizations, just in case people have questions in the chat. So any questions of the group? I'm going to go ahead and facilitate the community updates. So I'll ask if there's any questions for the group from the meeting attendees. Okay, great. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks to Desiree, Jillian, Marcus, Sierra, and Sinclair, and also to A Woman's Place and Alternatives to Violence and Crossroads Safe House for all the important work that you do. And I know this also been a priority of the NoCO CoC over the last couple of years, is how I think it was mentioned in the presentation. How do we connect the CAHPS by name list with the list of people who have been impacted by domestic violence, because there are different levels of privacy for those two lists. And so there's been a lot of work that's been done by the VSP organizations and the NoCO CoC staff for the sake of coordinating and helping those who are impacted by domestic violence to have opportunity for housing, just the same housing opportunities as other people on the by name list. So thanks for all your work. So we're going to have a time for community updates, and I'll just kind of show out some categories of activity and just see if there's any kind of updates in those by the community, by the NoCO CoC members here in the meeting. So does anybody have any kind of updates related to outreach for people that are experiencing homelessness? Any new outreach activities or updates? How about any of us working in discharge planning from incarceration or hospitalization? Any updates in that area? Okay, how about any sheltering updates with Rescue Mission or Catholic Charities or Murphy Center or the Housing Navigation Center? Any updates for sheltering, day shelter, or overnight shelter with our shelter providers?
Lyle, I'd like to give an update. This is Allison
Yep.
with the City of Loveland for the Loveland Resource Center and the South Railroad Facility. On Tuesday night of this week, we had a city council presentation where we actually, for the first time, added the ability to create a shelter into our zoning code. And any community really needs that in order to make a determination about where a shelter can be, should be, and won't be. So we got that accomplished. The conversation really did show that there's support on our city council, and also that, of course, in any community, there's opposition. So as we are moving forward, the City of Loveland with Homeward Alliance taking the lead on creating new shelter options, I believe that we'll be, at least from our team, kind of reaching out to a few of you to ask a couple questions about your shelter facilities to get an understanding and additional information that could help with facilitating new shelter options in Loveland in the future. Some of you might know that we are looking at a particular location that's on 287. We've had a press release, so it's not private information. And of course, we have people, as I'd said, who are in opposition to that. So Homeward Alliance is doing a magnificent job of making sure that the conversation is well-rounded and inclusive. And if you have any input for this, especially the shelter operators, if you're aware of the conversation, we would appreciate any assistance we can get. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Jordan, did you have an update?
Yes. Hey, everybody. Jordan Lamport with Hunger Free Colorado. I just wanted to, on the outreach side of things, give a quick update regarding the summer EBT program. Hunger Free Colorado has been doing, primarily SNAP outreach. And during the pandemic, we were able to do a lot of work for the PEBT program, which was the pandemic EBT program, which provided summer benefit to eligible households for, basically a $120 amount. And that was basically due to the Fiscal Responsibility Act in 2023. That program converted into the now permanent summer EBT program in Colorado. And so households who are eligible, who are enrolled in SNAP, who are on Medicaid, who are enrolled in the NSLP program, should start to receive the summer EBT cards, for which will have a, per child in the household will have $120. And so we've been doing some outreach with this, and just wanted to basically float that. And if folks had questions about how to get the benefit, or about your household and if you qualify and stuff like that, would be happy to just share my contact and just let you follow up and ask questions. And it's a new program, but the cool thing about it is that it's funded permanently, so it'll be available to Coloradans in future summers. So that's the summer EBT update I had. And then just wanted to also say thank you to the presenters, Alternatives to Violence and Crossroads. Working in SNAP outreach, we had probably about a year ago, a presentation with the address confidentiality program through the state of Colorado. And I guess I was thinking about your presentation and just had a question about, if there are other places to go, if you're working with folks around the state, just because I know, DV issues can sometimes be really, can come down to regionality. And so if you guys have any other information about, if you're working with people in a certain region of Colorado who have concerns or who want to keep, their address private during, provider services, I guess my question would be like, where would you go if, you're here up in Larimer County, but you wanted to maybe work with somebody in the Southern Colorado or in Denver? And yeah, so thanks for the update, or let me give some updates, and would be happy to follow up directly with Alternatives to Violence or Crossroads for just further collaboration.
Hey, Jordan, this is Carrie Clark. I'm the Executive Director at Alternatives to Violence, and we would love for you to do that, and anybody else too who would like further training. If you have staff who work with case management or is advocating for any clients who they suspect may be victims of domestic violence, they're more than happy to reach out to any of us depending on location. And for statewide, there is a coalition, the Colorado, it's called Violence Free Colorado. And that's good if anybody knows anything statewide to find the best person to contact in your area, or just to receive trainings from them as well.
Thanks, Carrie and Jordan. C. Powers, did you have an update?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you. This has been really, really good. So I'm with Catholic Charities of the Guadalupe Center here in Weld County in Greeley. And we just have had a couple of, new policies, procedures in place to try to be able to take in more individuals and families and serve as many as we can. So we've opened the overflow program to we could have 15 total people in the family room, and then in our cafeteria we could put an additional 30 people in there. So yeah. Sorry, can you guys still hear me? So pardon that interruption. Anyway, we're continuing to serve families both in the overflow program and the transition to housing program, which is a 150-day program, approximately 5 months, that helps individuals save money, and ultimately housing, of course, is our main goal. But we work on a lot of things in between there as well. So just kind of putting some new things into practice over here, and helping to serve more people. But this has been amazing, wonderful information, and I really appreciate all of y'all. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other updates on sheltering? One I do know in Well County is that the Housing Navigation Center, because of some City of Greeley funding, extended the overnight shelter from when it normally closes in mid-April to still going on, and that's going to close the overnight shelter part of the Housing Navigation Center in Greeley. That's going to close on July 31. So the hours will go back to that we know of right now is that the hours will go back to weekday hours only, and then with the idea that the overnight shelter will again open in November. How about any updates on housing? Any housing projects that have been approved, or any significant progress on any new housing projects, or any rapid rehousing funding that's been approved, or anything in that area of work?
This is Jody Hartman with High Plains Housing. So as many of you know, we were successful in financially closing the Star Rise Permanent Supportive Housing Project in Greeley. That happened the end of May, and so we are now under construction on that highly needed project. We will have 58 one-bedroom units available for our chronically homeless population, hopefully by the end of 2025.
Thanks, Jody. And I have been by the property, and I see that buildings have been knocked down. So it's for real. No going back now.
That's true. Yep. Exciting.
Great, great. Laura, what's your update?
This is just my shameless plug for SSVF. I just wanted to just send an update to everybody about kind of like what we spoke about earlier, just referring veterans to SSVF if they come across any of your areas, or if you hear of anybody. We can always determine pretty quickly whether they will be eligible for SSVF or just the VA. So just my shameless plug, and I'll put our contact info in the chat so people know how and when to refer.
Thanks, Laura. Any other? So what is SSVF, Laura? There's a question in the chat. What's the acronym?
I always forget people don't know that because, it's not common knowledge. So SSVF stands for Supportive Services for Veteran Families. So we work with veterans in all across the state of Colorado, but here in Northern Colorado, we cover all of the counties up here, and we work with veterans who are actively experiencing homelessness or those who are about to lose their housing. And like Betsy spoke about earlier, we do have a program called Returning Home, that if a veteran presents and is not wanting to remain in Colorado and wants to go back to where they're from or live with family, that is an option that we can do for veterans to get them back to safety, as well as try to help maintain housing if they're living with family. So there's a ton of resources through SSVF. Our shallow subsidy program is an option for them as well, and that can they can be eligible for rental assistance for 50% of their rent for up to 2 years. So it's a pretty incredible program, and in order for them to get that, they do have to be enrolled with SSVF. So yeah, we have a lot of resources for vets, so please send them our way if you know of anybody.
Thanks, Laura. Any other updates in the housing area? How about any other updates overall for us as NoCO CoC members? Anything going on that you want everybody to know about? Okay, great. Well, I do know one thing on the horizon is the annual announcement of the annual HUD funding process, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. That typically comes out this time of year, late July or early August. So that's something that's going to be happening over the next 3 months or so. Once the NoFo drops is the language that we use or people use. So we're waiting for that drop. And I do know that one thing that we need for the process, there's a part of the process called the Project Rating and Ranking Committee. Because the process, we can submit applications. There's a lot of renewal applications that get submitted, and if there's new interest in the HUD funding, and then that all goes to the first step, an application goes to Project Rating and Ranking Committee. And that's what helps the CoC governing board in the process, really to hone down what is most needed, what is fitting with the priorities of the CoC, which is what we were talking about earlier, short-term and long-term priorities. So if you would like to volunteer with the Project Rating and Ranking Committee, you can be in touch with me, or I'd say email me about it. And my email is Lyle, Lyle, at unitedway-well.org. But Kelly Pryor will, just like last year, not as an employee now, but as a contractor, she's going to be the person that will be facilitating the process. So anybody that wants to volunteer for the Project Rating and Ranking Committee, we will eventually connect you with Kelly on it. So any other updates? Yeah, go for it, Christine. And correct me if I said something wrong.
No, I think that was correct. That's my understanding. Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand, but I'm like, maybe because I'm host, I don't have that ability. Because I was struggling. I just wanted to do a quick reminder, and I'm going to put it in the chat. But the NoCO CoC has put out a diversity survey for our general membership to kind of just understand who we have at the table, and this is really valuable information to understand current representation for funding applications, reports, recruitment, etc. So please, if you have not already taken this survey, we're going to keep it open until the end of today. So we'd really appreciate if you just took about 1 minute of your time. It's really quick. Just fill it out. We'd really appreciate it. And I'm going to send it right now. So thank you very much.
So any other updates? Okay, well, that is our meeting, I believe. So the next meeting, the next general member meeting will be September 19. That's a Thursday again. September 19 from 9 to 11 a.m. So same format, different agenda, but hopefully you have that on your calendar if you don't have the meeting invite for it. But September 19, 9 to 11 a.m. Okay, anything else, Christine?
Okay. I don't think so.
Great. All right. Well, everybody, have a great day. And thanks for all the important and very sometimes difficult work that you do. It's so important for the people that we serve and for our communities overall. So have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.